this computer. Great. Not too long, but we just wanted to make sure that we were going through all of the important things that we need to know between now and when we can't run ads on Facebook anymore. I realize that this is a very Facebook-centric presentation. We haven't done a lot around Google, but that's also, I think, we know that, let's see, is that where, here we go. We're not going to be spending a ton there. Can you guys all see my screen okay? Yeah?
Yep.
Great, okay. So we're gonna go over timeline, spend pacing, audiences, and then we have open topic for discussion at the end here. So what you should be running from now until the week of the election. We're right now actually starting next week, we're still running Name ID. I know a lot of us have budget for turnout at this point in the cycle, but for the most part, any turnout that we do should be accompanied with like heavy Name ID ads. Starting the week of October 5th, still doing Name ID and then starting to do some early vote reminders. You can see as we move on to October 12th, really hammering on the date in the creative. October 19th, very similarly, and then October 26th leading up into the election, really bringing home the importance of getting out there and voting, and especially on election day. Spend pacing. So right now, you guys all have a budget that probably looks like this anyway, but what we are trying to encourage people is to take a look at your spend and pace it out so that the majority of it is spent around the election day. So for us, that's October 13th through the 30th. And then obviously that last push into November. And I can actually give an example of how I've broken this down using James Tallarico's media plan. So this is what we were told to spend September, October, November on persuasion and turnout. And these are kind of like the sums for each month. So what you can see here is we actually just launched really early, or actually I think like this the week of September 14th, but late in that week. So we're only able to really spend about $200 or so on each universe. This is a projected spend for this week, ending on Sunday. And then you can see as it's going to ramp up leading up until November. And if you were to plot this, you would see it would look very similar to the graph that I showed you. And then I broke it down by day, what the estimate by day should be. Going back to this here. The one thing to call out, and something that Brenna brought to my attention, is that around mid-October, most of the campaigns have paid off their mailers, they've paid for their TV spots, and they'll have money left over and they won't have anywhere else to spend it except for digital. So you might get a campaign coming to you saying like, I have an extra $3,000, can you spend it for us? And we will say, of course we can, or we will try. So know that around that time, it could very easily come in. We can come into some money on our campaigns and we'll need to figure out how to allocate it. So targeting, and I'm sure like since we've all had meetings with our campaigns, we have an understanding of, you know, what their hope is and who we're reaching. And this is a very traditional get out the vote type of audience targeting. And Bistro's going to go into the different types of audiences a little bit more thoroughly. But you can see we have these tier 1 get out the vote targets and tier 2 get out the vote targets. The tier 1s are the ones that we know would vote Democrat if they got to the polls, but they're not super likely to turn out. They might be somewhere in the middle or lower propensity. So it's really important for us to get our representatives' names in front of them and also remind them to go and vote. We then, if we're going to expand outside of that tier 1, we expand to tier 2, which are the people who might lean a little bit more moderate, but still we believe would vote for our representative if they got to the polls. Bistro, do you want to talk about how to build these audiences?
Yeah, definitely. So basically this waterfall sort of starts off with the most specific audience and then goes into the broadest. And so we're going to want to use all three of these different type of audiences in Facebook. And just in case you guys are not like Facebook experts, I'll just define these a little bit. So a custom audience is essentially like a list of names, phone numbers, emails that we upload to Facebook, and Facebook matches those people directly. The lookalike audience is you upload your custom audience, and Facebook will build an audience of folks that have similar characteristics as the people that were in your original audience. So it's a really good way to just, expand a very small audience and make it a little bigger. And then broad audience is essentially just using Facebook's demographic and interest targeting. So what we're going to want to do is starting off, basically, we're going to be doing broad audience with name ID. So what that means is the zip codes for all the folks that are in your district, and then exclusions of like terms related to the GOP. That's going to get us to like the bread and butter people who are in the district who could potentially be persuaded. And actually, if you go on to the next slide, I have more detail about that. So name ID targeting. So this is kind of the type of campaigns that we're going to want to run essentially now until the end. So it's like getting the person's name across, making sure that people in the district are able to just repeat it over and over, basically, right? Like we want to increase the frequency. A lot of these districts are only like a few 100,000 people, so it's not super hard. But basically what you'll want to do is include all of the zips that are in your district, and then actually Christian will probably send out this PowerPoint after, but there's like a really easy way to do it. There's like a Texas House page that just lists all of the district zips. So you can literally just copy paste that right in. Then the key thing though that I will say is you should exclude interests related to stuff like Donald Trump, Fox, Sean Hannity, Daily Caller, like all these like kind of trolly like GOP type things. What'll happen is, number one, those people will never vote for Democrats anyway. And number two, they like to troll ads and like do like negative commentary, and they will also like downvote them. And so it's just a lot easier for us to get better delivery and engagement for our ads if we just exclude those people. So you can come up with your own list. There'll be some suggestions on Facebook too, but definitely just make sure to do those exclusions. And then the other thing I would say is there's no need for inclusions, like things like lean Democrat. Basically, the goal is to go broad, get everyone in the district, just exclude the folks that are like going to be trolls essentially, and focus on that. So an inclusion is just going to make your list artificially smaller, which we don't need because it's already cheap enough anyway to target them. Next slide. Okay, so for the Get Out the Vote custom list, so this is going to be starting basically October 13th when early voting starts. We're going to want to just pummel all our folks who we know are likely Democrats. So basically what we're going to be doing at Tech for Campaigns is mimicking what the campaign is doing on their end. So basically they just create lists of their best potential voters, but people who are unlikely to go vote. And then they call them, they mail them, text them to remember, to make sure they remember to vote for the candidate. And so the key people we want to reach is who are likeliest to vote Democrat, but who are unlikely to turn out on their own. If they were likely to turn out, then we don't really need to spend money to tell them about it. And so on the ad side, basically, the way that you would operationalize this in ads is just, continue to have ads with the candidate's name and logo, which is super important. We want to keep pressing name ID, but also you can say stuff like, remember to go vote, send them to a page about information of where to find polling places. You can be kind of like suggestive and give them ideas about where and when to vote, but make sure to just have the candidate's name on there. And then one last thing too, in Texas, this year is the first year that they do not have straight ticket voting. So before, in other years, you could just like Democrat all the way down and just click one thing. Now every single thing has to be filled out individually. So what some of the Texas State House candidates are a little worried about is people are just going to go vote for Biden and Trump, maybe the Senate election, and just be like, okay, peace, I'm done. And so this is why we really want to promote things like don't stop at the top, like vote all the way down the ballot, these kind of messages to make sure people know that they need to actually actively pick a choice there. Okay, next slide. Okay, cool. So I'm going to actually show you guys too how to get these audiences specifically, and I'll screen share in a second. But basically, if you don't have access to your candidate's van instance, just email the campaign manager and ask them to add you. It's super easy. And what'll happen is you just get an email that tells you to sign up, you fill out your two-factor authentication, and then you can be in there really quickly. The good news is that there's some really cool lists that people who are data scientists hired by the Texas Democrats have already made for us, who are essentially like the people that we're trying to reach. These are the same lists that the campaign is going to be using. So this is going to be really, really helpful to us. And then if you can just go one more slide real quick. Cool. So what I'm about to show you guys is essentially, this is like a really similar thing as to the first slide that Chris Aaron showed. But basically the left side is this Texas Democrat Party partisanship score that they've modeled out. And then the average turnout score is from 0 to 100 of how likely they are to turn out. So basically the people we want, number one is this Mobilize A group, Mobilize B and Mobilize C2. The reason why is Mobilize A is probably going to be really small. So let me share my screen and then I'll show you guys how to actually run these lists. Okay, let's see. It says you disabled attendee screen sharing. Is there any way to enable it or give me permissions? Okay.
Right now, got it?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So this is where you would end up if you just log in to texasfan.com, which is the CRM. And basically what you want to do is go to people, create a list. And you're going to have a bunch of different criteria that you can make lists off of. So you want to scroll down to targets. And then basically, so these are all different ways that, they've like sliced and diced the data. The latest one that we care about is this 2020 state house target tiers. And these are auto updated for every single candidate. So basically you go to Mobilization A. You can preview the results, and that's going to be 11,000 people. That's not very much. So that's why if we want to add B and C, we're going to get to around 35,000. So basically this, you run the search. You're going to get a little like my list that populates, and then you can export after that. Now, I would say, and you can export as Excel or Google Sheet. The things to watch out for here are basically number one, definitely be very sensitive about data. So if you're exporting and downloading a list, like delete it immediately after you upload it to Facebook. You may have to change up the headers on the list to match the custom upload lists on Facebook and the way that they require you to do it. And the other thing is about these lists is that there's not going to be emails on them. So what we're expecting, out of a list of like 36,000 people with just name, address, and phone number, I would expect something around like a 50-ish, at best match rate. So these are going to be, we really care about all the people that we get in this audience. It's a very important audience for us. However, we're not going to know how big it is because Facebook also will not show us the total audience size since a lot of these accounts are political accounts. And there's like privacy issues related to that. So essentially, like you'll really want to do this. You will end up with a list that you should just kind of test and run and like start putting like $100 a day in it. See if it can spend the 100, maybe increase it a little bit more just to see how much leverage you can get on it. Because we cannot know ahead of time sort of how big the lists are going to be, but those are going to be the most important things for get out the vote.
And so the campaigns that we would be testing with these lists to make sure that we can get some reach would be the turnout ads, right?
Exactly. So I think you can start playing around with these now. I mean, definitely, download them, upload them to Facebook at least so you have them ready. And then, probably start running them like, mid or early October, essentially, like, October 5th or 6th or something like that, just to try to see. October 13th and on is going to be super important. That's when early voting's already started. We're trying to get everyone to the polls, spend all our money. But I do want to say, like, the campaigns really, really care about us using these GOTV custom lists. They're obviously like the best thing that we have to know like who exactly the people are we want to target. But we know that we will not be able to spend our entire budget on that very likely, just because they're probably going to be on the smaller side. So what we're recommending is essentially for you guys to start with this as your like number one GOTV list. Number two is build a 1% lookalike of this list and then spend on that. So essentially what we're trying to get to is like, you know, who is the most close type of person to this, where there's enough of a large audience where Facebook will actually deliver our whole budgets, you know, if we're spending a couple $1,000s in a month or something like that.
And we would build those lookalikes 1%, including the zip code targeting and the GOP exclusions.
Exactly. So I think that the zip code targeting is a must for any audience that you're building. Obviously, like we don't want to spend for people that are outside the districts, right? So even on your lookalikes, definitely add that as a filter.
Does this audience database have zip codes or the districts attached to them, or are we going to depend on Facebook's filtering tool?
So for the GOTV ones, they do have audiences. So everything that is in there for a particular candidate is only the people in their district. So from that point of view, you don't have to really, for the custom list in particular, you can add the zip code filter, but it won't really do much. Like everyone will just automatically be in there. For the lookalikes, I would say definitely add the zip code filter because, you know, Facebook might be trying to pull folks from a little bit further out geographically.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on the GOTV on custom lists?
On the zip code filter, Facebook gives you options for people living in the location or living in and visiting. I've usually been doing just living in. Should we just stick with that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say yes. You know, I don't think that it's going to exclude too many people. My like initial worry is just like, oh, are we getting rid of some people who live there but didn't say that? I don't think so. Like, I think the way that they do their like visiting thing is like actually they're like tracking your phone and like wherever you are located, they're actually gonna. So, you know, I think living in is fine. Basically what that's gonna assume is that they just put that down as their address, you know, when they were signing up or whatnot. And I think that's good enough.
Any other questions on this before we move forward? No? Okay. Lookalikes.
Yeah, so this is just a little bit more of what I mentioned, but basically, like if you think of the waterfall of audiences, our number one audience is these custom lists from the Texas Democrat data scientists. The second one is going to be a lookalike based off of that custom audience with the zip code filter, just so we can like approximate a little bit more, you know, who's a Democrat, who do you want to turn out, but get a large enough audience size. And then the third is the broad audience, which we don't want to be running on get out the vote. We definitely want to, that's just kind of for name ID and just getting the name out there.
Great. Metrics. So I don't know if you guys attended this week's ad training, you saw this quadrant. I think it's a really good gut check around understanding how your ads are performing and if you need to do any optimizations. I think only one of our teams is in this like happy space, which is Oliver's team, James Tallarico's ads. I think that also has a lot to do with the fact that we ran ads on that for that account starting in June. So they have Facebook is kind of like knows who this advertiser is and that they've been spending money. So that's good. Ad recall rate, we're targeting around 10 to 15%. This line is at 12, but 10 to 15 is a good recall rate that we should be shooting for. If it's not doing as well as that, it means that the creative probably needs some optimization. It's not doing enough to stand out in the feed, and we need to do something to make some improvements. Along with that, as CPMs, we want to be less than $7, but I think it's going to get more expensive as we get closer to the election. So that's just something to keep an eye on. And then frequency. Go ahead, Bistra.
Audiences are going to be more expensive also. So you shouldn't be like too afraid if you see them like way higher than the broad audience, just because it's going to be a way smaller number of people. But definitely, you know, you want to keep it low, but just know that, I guess, like, don't be too afraid to spend on the custom audience, even if it seems too expensive.
Yeah, and I think also in Slab, there's a really good reference for 2018 benchmarks for specifically for custom audience CPM, so we can look at that and see if we're wildly off base or not. My daughter's screaming in the other room. I'm sure you can hear. And then last is frequency. So a lot of our media plans were developed with frequency in mind to understand like how much we should spend at different times in the election cycle. So we say minimum of 2. Minimum, I mean, that's considered weak. We want people to see our ads twice. An okay ad is one that's being served or seen 3 to 4 times per person. But our goal is really around 5 to 6. Like ideally we get to 9 or 10, but it's not possible with what we're working with. So something just to keep track of and kind of like help us understand how we're doing. Ad types to run. It's just all you.
Awesome. So yeah, basically we just wanted to like, just so it's like super clear and easy for everyone to just like, you know, make these essentially, wanted to just like call out a couple of the ad types that are really easy to make. Basically, you know, number 1 is this name ID and awareness. And that's the stuff we're going to be running from now until, you know, mid-October and even beyond. Literally the goal is just like, get people to read the person's name over and over again. Like, I know it sounds silly, but it's like, you know, if someone gets to their ballot and is like, oh, I've heard this before, or like that person had a weird name, like, great, they'll vote. You know, it's really not about necessarily needing to tie them to any policy position by any means. It's kind of just the name of the game of like calling them, you know, showing this as many times as possible. So name ID ads are basically going to be saying your candidate's name a lot, you know, telling them what the race is, Texas State House Representative. I will say again, the don't stop at the top thing is going to be important messaging to tell people, hey, vote all the way up and down the ballot. Basically, yeah, the Facebook objective that you want to build off of is the brand lift one. So, you know, it's the same thing that brands use to figure out whether or not, you know, that people are like remembering their advertisements. It works great for politics. So you'll be able to get some metrics that are basically showing like the estimated number of people that would remember this ad or like the candidate's name if you ask them 2 days after they saw the ad. And there's a bunch of like stats, you know, that Facebook is doing behind the scenes for this. They do like little mini surveys, but basically this is actually like a decently accurate metric. And then percent brand lift from ad is essentially like what percent of all the folks that saw the ad then would, you know, additionally remember it. The other thing too about using the brand lift objective is that Facebook will show the ad to people who are more likely to remember it. So you're automatically kind of like focusing in on the folks that we really want, which are just like gonna look at ads, engage with them, and actually remember them. Cool. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. And then video ads also, similarly to the image ads on name ID, you know, the Facebook campaign objective you'll want is video views. And basically this is either like if your campaign has made a video, awesome, like throw it up on Facebook. Like we're getting, in one of my campaigns is getting like a 3 cents per like full video view, which is great. You know, people are actually like watching the whole thing and it's super cheap. The other cool thing about them is you can get the candidate to just do like a selfie video, like a really quick, like 15-second thing of like, hi, I'm blah, blah, blah. And, you know, this is my campaign. Those ones, you know, take a very short amount of time for the candidate. You can throw on their logo in the top of it and then put that up on Facebook and Instagram and, you know, get a ton of leverage out of that. So I would say definitely ask your candidates to do this. Also, we can put these up on YouTube, which is just another additional channel to reach people by. If I were to say, you know, what are the most important channels, definitely Facebook and Instagram. When you're doing all of your campaigns, just like add the Instagram placement, don't remove it. There's, you know, we're still gonna find like a lot of good people on there. And then if you had one more to choose, I would do YouTube if you have some videos, because you can do the zip code targeting on there, and the videos are a really good way to get people to remember the name.
Bistro, what do you think is a good daily budget for YouTube? Like what? What's the rule of thumb in terms of like, if you can spend this much on YouTube, you should try and test something?
Well, what I would do is look at, so spend, you know, maybe start off by equally spending on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and actually just compare the metrics. So if one of them, and compare the metrics of like video watched to 95% or completed essentially. So if one of them is way cheaper, then I would just say, you know, throw more budget there. If they're about the same, then, you know, you can keep the budget similar to, I would kind of spend based on where it's performing best, and you'll be easily able to compare the two between Facebook and YouTube.
Great. Any questions about video?
Yeah, I have a question. Are there any like best practices? Let's say if our candidate doesn't have any ready-made video and we ask to create a selfie video, is there like yeah, like best practices we can share or examples?
Definitely. I can post something that one of the folks made that is working on a campaign that I'm on. And she basically made a guide for a candidate. And then they're using that to create their videos. So I'll just post that in the Texas channel, and then you guys can take a look.
Thanks.
Yeah, totally. And you can feel free to like send that also to the candidate as well. Cool. Okay, so get out the vote ads. So basically, the thing I'll say about get out the vote ads is number one, we just still want to push name ID. So like continue to put the person's photos and name continuously on them. And also we can tell people about voting. So the key things that you want to do are basically October 13th through the 30th is early voting. At that point, you're going to want to run ads that just tell people like, go vote now, go vote early, your vote matters, your vote counts, you know, get there early, like whatever messaging, you know, you can build urgency off of. Countdown clocks work well for this. You know, you can have like a little like animation or an image of a calendar or a clock. Basically anything that, you know, visually builds urgency for people, and you can be a little more emphatic, I would say, in these. In this example, you know, they're using some emoji. Definitely feel free to use emoji. You know, they work well on Facebook ads. It's silly, but it works. And basically just make sure that you are running the ads sort of when voting is actually open. So October 13th through 30th. And, you know, after the 30th, obviously like there's no voting until the 3rd. So that's kind of like an interesting lull where your ads will probably just be telling people to like remember to vote on the 3rd, essentially. And here's another place to also say don't stop at the top, which like you'll want to repeat over and over.
I think it's an interesting point that if the Facebook ad freeze goes into effect on the 26th or something, we will probably have turnout ads that are talking about early voting running at the same time as ads that are talking about showing up on election day.
Yeah, and the suggestion there for you guys is just build a new campaign. So what I would do is like build a new campaign for all of the ads you want to run past, you know, the 27th or whatever of like vote on election day. Throw them all in one campaign, and then just put like a $5 spend on it a day or something like that beforehand, just so it's approved and spending on Facebook. And then, you know, you can flip up the budget after any time. So I think that's like a kind of way to still have it up, but then not necessarily be sending the wrong message or wasting money on the wrong message.
If it's spending $5, will it actually like spend that? Should it be more?
Well, before the 26th or whatnot.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever like small amount, basically. I'm just saying, you know, you don't want to like spend all your budget on the ads that are saying like go vote on election day.
Sure. Okay. Cool. Summary. Last slide, guys. So in summary, what we need to do between now and election day, the first thing is testing to find creative that meets our metrics goals and building and identifying our audiences. So like really figuring out what audiences are working, if we're getting to enough people. You know, a lot of our districts are trying to reach around like 50,000 to 60,000 people. So we want to make sure that our custom audiences are supported by lookalikes and that we're reaching enough people and they're seeing our ads enough times. Once we've tested creative, like really starting to deliver what we know is working to people and increasing our frequency and hitting that like 5 to 6 times per user metric. To be really upfront about it, a lot of our budgets have a goal of frequency around 2 to 3 just because of the amount of money we have. So we might never get to that 5 to 6 times per person, but know that we have a minimum of 2 as a goal for frequency for each of our individuals that we're trying to reach. And then the last is launching final creative to run to our established audiences through election day by the 21st. So really like trying to figure out what's working, who we're serving it to, so that we can get everything queued up and ready to go by the time we are not allowed to touch it anymore. Any questions? No, none? How you guys feeling? Confident? Worried?
Feel like we'll figure it out. Our ads group just got started like in the past week, really ramping up. So it's thinking that we'll find our rhythm pretty soon. Hopefully, get some good stuff going.
Good news is all of the ad groups just launched in the last week or so. So you're in good company. Everyone's kind of feeling the same.
One thing I'll say is like, don't be afraid to sort of like use what other teams are doing. You know, you don't need to like be recreating the wheel all the time with these ads. Like literally, if something looks good, just like use the same concept. You know, you don't have to go crazy on just like worrying about, oh, is this right or not? A lot of the stuff in the ads library is totally reusable.
Yeah. Anything that you guys are worried about? No? Good.
Is there a place where there's all of the creative that everyone's running?
There is, yeah. Here, I will link that right now in our Texas Teams little chat. And basically this is like a Google report that, like a data studio report that was created by TFC. So it's pulling in all the live data from Facebook. So if you just go on the left, there's a Facebook All Creative post. And then basically you can like rank it by which ones are performing the best. So it makes it really easy to see, you know, what's doing well, essentially. So yeah, I just linked that in there.
What's nice about that is you can look at the creative alongside performance.
Yeah, it's really helpful. I check that like almost every day just to see.
And it's pulling directly from Facebook. Let me see if I can pull it up. You might know the answer to this question. We have one rep who wants to run fundraising ads on Facebook.
Now?
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's our reaction.
Yeah. I mean, you could, if you pixeled, you know, the Act Blue page properly, and you could just, you know, test it with like $200 and just see whether or not you're actually getting anything at all. And then maybe you just tell them like, hey, this doesn't work.
That's kind of what we were thinking, was maybe we just like put a test up to see how it does.
Yeah. But definitely only do it if you can, you know, get the results into Facebook. That is like have the Facebook pixel really be installed on Act Blue.
Totally. Yeah, and I don't think that that's part of the ad ops process.
Yeah,
right?
it's not.
So you can see the creative here.
Yeah, and the best ones, honestly, like, yeah, they have the logo. A lot of them have a photo of the rep. A few of them don't, but yeah, if you see these Eric Holgan ones that are doing well, it's literally just him and like a big banner that says his name.
Don't get purged. No say Perque. Yep. Any other questions? Hi, Julie.
Oh, this is super helpful.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
And in the Texas Teams Slack, I just posted the link to the selfie video tips. So it says like Terry Meza a lot on the candidate, but feel free to just like clone it and update it for your own folks.
Miriam, that could be an opportunity for us to get some Spanish ads up, like have her do a selfie video in Spanish, because I know she's struggling.
Yeah.
Bistra has some experience setting up Spanish ads as well. I don't know if you want to share any tips there.
Yeah, so the only thing that we learned basically, so you can create one ad in multiple different languages and versions, and it's called like dynamic translation or something. The problem with that is just that you cannot report on English versus Spanish. So at least on my campaign, we thought it was important enough to understand how we're performing against the different groups that we just split them out into separate campaigns.
So it dynamically would change the language depending on who it's showing to?
So it will not auto-translate. So you have to put in, you know, the Spanish of every single thing, like the CTA, header, et cetera, an image. But based on the language that the person is using on Facebook, it will auto show them, you know, either the Spanish or the English one.
Is there a way, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Is there a way to select for just Spanish-speaking people and target only Spanish-speaking people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when you're setting it up in the ad set, when you're doing the targeting with zip codes, right underneath it, there should be like a language target that you do.
Gotcha. Okay.
What happens when people are having trouble spending? They just like can't get their ads to spend at all.
It's a really good question. I think, yeah, trying to broaden the audience sometimes. I mean, it won't always work. Adding new creatives, definitely. Doing anything to sort of like reset on Facebook, which is like make any changes that Facebook deems material. So definitely just like adding new creatives, add a couple of zip codes maybe that are like nearby. But yeah, I think the name of the game is just to start as early as possible, and Facebook will take a few days to figure out your ads. And so, you know, you might spend like $50 on the first day, you know, get to like 75, 80, and then get to your full daily budget after that.
And then when we're getting close to the 21st and we need to choose winning creative, like, I mean, I guess the guess would be that you look at what creative is performed the best based on the metrics we have.
Yeah, I would suggest like running a large variety of ads. You know, the ones that you have been running for a while, even if they have been performing, just may, if you're only showing very few of them, may get stale. So I would definitely recommend running at least 3, 4, 5 creatives in a campaign to rotate them out, and definitely just pause the ones that, you know, like never got really any impressions, like really did tremendously lower than your average. But make sure to just not only have only 1 or 2 at the end also.
If we're testing different ones every week because our campaign wants us to match up with their mailer messaging, so basically we'll be doing like a couple different ones every week. I imagine the metrics will be different week to week, especially because the spend will be different and behavior will also be different as we approach the election. I'm thinking that might bias the more recent creatives towards better performance. How would you like compare ads across different weeks?
That's a very good question. I would try to, you can definitely, you're right, like it probably will bias them. Sometimes what'll happen is like if one of them was really good and it started getting a lot of impressions, Facebook kind of does like the easiest thing for Facebook, which is just like, hey, we know this ad works, let's keep it running. So sometimes like when some of the earliest ads actually just continue to get impressions because they worked early on, essentially. So I would try to focus on the ones that Facebook in its campaign is actually giving more impressions to. So those are always, or more likely, going to be the ones that Facebook has deemed, you know, the best ones over time. But yeah, you're right. I think there's no like great way to get around what you're talking about. And it's just like looking at, comparing all of the ads together from all of the time groups, and then just looking at, best performance in terms of the percent recall lift, and then also like the impressions.
Got it.
In terms of just like campaign objectives and optimizing events, I've been doing just ad recall and optimizing for just lowest cost ad recall. Is that what everyone else is doing, or is there, a recommended best practice for us?
For the name ID stuff right now, definitely ad recall is the best. So definitely keep doing that. I would say as we get into GOTV audiences and we're doing those custom audiences, I would actually probably switch to reach, only because they're going to be so small that we just want to make sure we're hitting everyone in them. So you can do reach there. You can also do brand recall for the later GOTV audiences. Like all that's doing is just making sure that they're showing the ad to a lot of people with a high frequency. And then if you have videos, just do the video views objective. And that should get you like also with enough reach.
Gotcha. Okay.
Cool. Anything else, guys? No? Okay, I hope this was useful. We can do it again in a couple weeks just to like touch base on where we are, and if people have questions, and it'll be more of just a talk than a presentation. But feel free. Bistra is one of our super volunteers, which is why she helped build out this presentation. This is also she's been volunteering since 2016, so she's a battle-tested TFC volunteer. We appreciate having her, and I appreciate having all of you guys. So feel free to reach out. Otherwise, thank you so much, and I'll give you back the rest of your evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right, thank
Bye.
you.
Everyone.